Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy programs. My name is Sarah. I work in the education department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, and we are so happy you're joining us today because today is not any ordinary Online Academy day. Today we are celebrating Shark and Ray Awareness Day. So here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, we are joining in with other AZA accredited zoos and aquariums, which is a big association. It's the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It's a group of zoos and aquariums that come together, and we are celebrating the Shark and Ray Awareness Day to talk about all the conservation efforts that are being done to protect sharks and rays. Now, there's about 1,200 species of sharks and rays, and they are super important in our oceans. And so we really want to teach about them, make sure everyone knows about them, and talk about ways that we can help protect these animals. Now, today, we are going to be focusing on rays. So we'll have some shark classes later today, but right now we are going to talk about rays, what these animals are, what they do, why they're important in the ocean. Now, if you have any questions while we're talking about the rays, we have a text line. You can text us those questions. It's right here on the screen. It's 562-286-1838. So if you have questions right now and you're watching this on July 14th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, send us those questions. Now, keep in mind that text and data rates do apply. And if you're one of our younger viewers, make sure you have adult permission before you text us. But text us your observations, your questions, anything you want to know a little bit more about rays. Now, if you're watching this program after we've aired live and you have questions, please send them to us. But instead of texting us, you're going to send us to this email that's right below that phone number, which is live@lbaop.org. So if you're watching live, you can text us those questions. And if you're watching after, send us those questions in your email. Now, throughout our program, if you find that you want to know more about sharks and rays and about Shark and Ray Awareness Day, we have this website that you can visit, and you can also donate from that website. So you can learn more and donate to the cause at pacific.to/Shark and Ray Day. All right, let's get started. So we're going to talk about rays, but what is a ray? Are they fish? Are they sharks? Are they their own group? Well, let's think about it. Let's take a look at a picture of a ray to start. So I'm not alone here in the studio. I am joined by Cynthia, who's changing all the pictures you're going to see behind me, and Dana is going to be taking all those wonderful questions and observations you send in. So right here, this is a picture of a cow-nose ray. Now, this is a pup or a baby. They're very cute. And let's take a look at this body. Does it look like anything you've seen before? Now, rays, they are a fish. So that word fish is actually a big term that covers a lot of animals. But usually, for most of us, when we hear the term fish, we think of animals like, I'm going to bring it up, a fish like a Garibaldi, which I'm going to have Cynthia bring up a picture in just a moment. So often we think of fish like this. Fish that have fins, they've got those scales covering their body, they have those eyes and the mouth. Now, what's special about this fish is we call it a bony fish, and that's because its skeleton is made of bone, just like your skeleton and my skeleton is all made of bone. So one group of fish, they are called bony fish because of their skeleton. Now, there's another group of fish, and that is going to be our sharks and our rays. And they're in a different category because their skeleton that runs through their body is not made of bone, but they still have a skeleton. Instead, their skeleton is made of cartilage. Have you heard that word before, cartilage? Do you have cartilage in your body? If you think you have cartilage in your body, point to where that cartilage would be. Point it to your nose, you're correct. If you point it to your ears, you're also correct. So we have a skeleton of bone, but we do have some cartilage in our body. Now, I want you to wiggle your nose and touch your ears and fold it over. And you notice that those things didn't break. They're pretty flexible. So cartilage is softer than bone, and it's flexible. And so the skeletons of these rays and sharks is really soft and flexible. And that helps with their mobility. It helps with how they move. So rays are a type of fish, but they're different than some of the fish that we think of more commonly as fish because of that skeleton. So that's one thing that makes a ray is having a cartilaginous skeleton. Now take a look at this ray. What else do you notice on its body? It kind of looks like it's ready to give you a hug. It wants to hug you for participating in Shark and Ray Awareness Day. But those things that look like it's reaching out to give you a hug, those are its fins. So they kind of look like wings. And when you see these animals swim through the water, they flap them up and down, kind of like you would imagine wings to move. But those are actually their fins. So rays have a cartilaginous skeleton. They have fins. Now what is this right here? I'm going to give you a hint. It's smiling at you. So that's its mouth. So rays have a mouth on the bottom, and their jaw is inside, and their jaw is really interesting. They have flat teeth. So they don't have teeth like ours or like you would think of sharks. And we can actually go over to my document camera and take a really quick look at the jaw of a ray. So this is a jaw from a bat ray. And you'll notice it almost looks like snakeskin here, but these are actually their teeth. And so they're flat, and they're really good for munching things. So rays, their main food source are going to be shelled animals like mussels and clams. They may also feed on shrimp or squid. That's some of the stuff that we feed our rays here. But in the ocean, they're going to be eating those shelled animals. And because these plates are flat, they're easier to break into those shells. So they can just munch them up. We can kind of make it with our hands to show that motion, is they kind of munch up those shells. And in their throat, just behind their jaw, they have something called papillae, which are these little hairs or structures. They're kind of soft. And what they do is they help push the shells of that animal back out of its mouth while keeping all the mushy inside of that mussel or clam, the food that the ray actually wants to eat, pushing it back into their mouth. So that is the mouth of a ray. So let's take a look back at that cow nose ray, that picture from the bottom. Oh, that's right. So we talked about they have a cartilaginous skeleton. They have fins, kind of look like wings. They have that mouth with those flat teeth. Now, what are these little hash marks right here? What do you think those are? Let's see, what things do fish have that help them survive in their habitat? So they have fins, they have their skeleton, they have their mouth, and they also need to breathe. So these right here are the rays' gills. So they have gill slits on the bottom. Now, a lot of rays will spend a lot of time sitting on the ocean floor. Now, that sounds kind of confusing because if they're sitting on the ocean floor, that would mean they're covering up those gills, right? They're sitting on the ocean floor. They're basically sitting on top of their gills. So how are they pumping water over those gills? So that leads us to another part of our ray. So if you look right here behind the eye of the ray, they have a hole. This kind of just looks like a little indent in their head, but it's actually a hole, and it's called a spiracle. We can all say that word together, spiracle. Now, spiracle is found in rays and also in some shark species. And what the spiracle does is it acts like a pump. So it pulls water in, and it pumps it over those gills. So even if the ray is sitting on the ocean floor, basically on top of their gills, and they're not moving, they're still able to pump water over those gills. They're still able to breathe. So that's another feature of our ray. So we have that cartilaginous skeleton. We have fins. We have their mouth. We have those gills. And they have eyes too. So that's a ray. So rays are in that family of fish with sharks, but unlike a shark, their body is what we call compressed. It's kind of flattened. It's almost if we took a shark and we made it flat like a pancake and spread its fins out. And that is our ray. Now, as I've been talking about these animals, I keep saying ray. And we had a question earlier when we were talking about rays, and that question was, do all rays sting? So often you may hear these animals referred to as stingrays. But we like to call them rays instead because not all rays have a stinger. Now, this picture right here is of a cow nose ray, and they are a stingray. They do have a stinger. Now, their stinger is going to be located right here. So a lot of people think that rays have a really long tail and their stinger is going to be at the very end. But it's actually at the base of their body where their tail meets their body. And that's where that little barb is. Now, depending on the type of stingray, they may have one barb, they might have two, some even have up to 6. It just depends on the species or the type of ray. But that stinger is not the only way that rays can protect themselves. And for most rays, stingrays included, thinking about a cow nose ray, their first line of defense, if they get scared, is not to use that stinger. So here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, you can actually pet a lot of our rays, our bat rays, our cow nose rays that have those stingers. And you can pet these animals safely because their first line of defense, if they get scared, what do you think it is? I'm going to give you a hint. It's not using that stinger. It's to swim away. So if they get spooked, their first line of defense is just swim away. And with those fins, which can be really large depending on the species, they can swim pretty fast. So for a ray like our cow nose or our bat rays that are stingrays, their first line of defense is just to swim away. And they'll only use that stinger if they're really, really threatened. So what we say to do when you go into the ocean, because we have a lot of rays that live here along our coast, is to do the stingray shuffle. Now what that means is when you go into the water, our rays can be living on the sand. So you just shuffle your feet, so you don't pick your feet up when you walk, you just shuffle them. And what that does is that scares the ray away. They're not going to use their stinger, they're just going to swim away, and then you won't get stung. Now, their stinger is what we call spring-loaded as well. So even if you were to just gently rub your hand over that stinger, which is very unlikely because they don't let you get near that part of their body, you'd have to press down really hard in order to have that stinger kind of pop up. So these animals, they're not using their stinger as that first line of defense. They're going to swim away. But like I said, not all rays have a stinger. So we're going to bring up a picture of another type of ray we have here. All right, take a look. Can you even see the ray in here? It's kind of hidden. So the ray in this picture is called a fiddler ray. And if you look at these, this is the eye, and these are all the brown kind of spots and patterns on this ray's body. And then here's more of its body. So this ray doesn't have a stinger. Instead, it has rougher skin than, say, the skin of that bat ray or the cownose ray. And what this ray does is camouflage. What's that word? That's a big word. What do you think the word camouflage means? Have you heard it before? So camouflage means blending into their surroundings. So their skin color is sort of a sandy brown, different shades. And then what they'll do is they'll shake their body and kind of wiggle into the sand until they're completely covered. And then it's really hard to see them. We only see little bits of this ray peeking out in this photo. So some rays will just cover themselves in the sand. Now this is a tropical ray, but we have a ray species here along our coast called a shovel-nosed guitarfish, which I don't think we have a picture of, but that's just a local ray that we have here. And they have a similar color body. They're more uniform, so they're more of this kind of brownish tan color, and they blend in really well with the sand. And so what they'll do is they'll just sit on the ocean floor, they'll shake their body until they're completely covered, and then you can't see them. There's also a ray that we have here along our coast called a thornback ray, and as its name implies, it has these little thorns that run down its spine. So not all rays are going to be using that stinger as protection, and that's why we don't call them all stingrays, because some have stingers, and some will use other ways to protect themselves. Now, it looks like we have some questions coming in. So before we introduce you to some of the ray species we have here at the aquarium, I'm going to take a look at these questions. All right, Sam wants to know, do we have cownose rays that live here in California? That is a great question. So we don't have cownose rays here in California. They are more of a tropical species, and that means they're going to live in waters that are a little bit warmer. They tend to live along coral reefs. This is a cownose ray. So they like water that's more in the mid-70s. But our water here along our coast is sort of the low 60s. We call our water temperate. So we've got tropical water, and then we've got really cold water like northern Pacific. And then here in Southern California, we have what we call our temperate water, which is in the low 60s. So we don't have cownose rays, but we do have a ray that looks very similar, but it gets a little bit bigger, and that is our bat ray. And I believe we may have a picture of a bat ray. I'm going to give Cynthia a minute to take a look and see if we do. Bat rays, oh, here we go. So they live in the kelp forests or in the sandy bottom, and these are one of my favorite animals here at the aquarium because I think of these rays as little puppy dogs. When you come to the aquarium and you go to pet these rays, they come right up to the surface, they come up to that wall, that glass window, and they love to be pet. So these are really cool animals. So these are a little bit bigger than the cownose rays, but their bodies are very similar looking, and they are a type of stingray. So no cownose rays, but we do have these bat rays. All right, Alex wants to know, how big can rays get? Excellent question. So the biggest ray is a pelagic manta ray, and it gets up to 23 feet. Now that is a huge animal. I am 5 foot tall, so that means my wingspan is only about 5 feet 2 inches. So that animal is about 4 times the size of me. So that is huge for an animal. Think about how big those manta rays are. Now I believe we do have a picture, or maybe even a video of a manta ray. We'll see if we can bring that up while I take a look at some of the other questions that we had. All right, so we're going to give Cynthia a moment, see if she can, do we have a manta ray picture? We may not have a manta ray, but they are the largest ray. Now, Bastian wants to know, why do they have a tail? Oh, excellent question. Why do they have a tail? Let's think about it. Now, if we were to watch a ray moving, they're not going to be using their tail to swim the way maybe a shark would. But does that mean that they don't serve a purpose? No, their tails definitely have a purpose. Think about that long, skinny tail. And if it moves sort of like this, what could they be doing with that tail? Some rays may use it as a whip to maybe protect themselves or even to catch their food. If their food is moving, they can whip it with their tail, and it can help stun that prey so they can eat it. It can also help with the way that they swim and their mobility. So that is why they have a tail. Now, some rays, like that fiddler ray that was kind of covered, their tail is a little bit thicker, and it's used more for balance than it would be on the tail of like that bat ray or that cownose ray. All right, so we are going to take a look at some of the rays that we have here. Now, I mentioned we do have cownose rays. So we're going to take another look at some pictures of cow-nosed rays because these pictures are really cute. These are pups. So that means they are babies. So we've had some baby cow-nosed rays here, and they're really cute, super smiley, like I said. And these ones are pretty much like puppies too, just like those bat rays. Now, something interesting about the way that rays give birth is they are born from eggs, but the female will actually hold the eggs inside her body. So it's an egg. It has its own yolk, which means that yolk is giving nutrients to that baby, but the mother is going to hold them in her stomach, and then the eggs actually hatch inside of her, and the baby is born alive. And rays, depends on the species, could have 2 or 3 pups at a time or even more, just depending on the species. And so we've had a couple of pups born here. Another picture of that cutie. All right, let's take a look. We have another picture of some other baby rays that we had here. And these are some really beautiful rays. We're going to bring up our blue ribbon-tail ray, blue spotted ribbon-tail ray, and you'll see why I had to add in the spots. Can you figure it out? This ray is pretty obvious why we call it a blue spotted ribbon-tail ray. Step out, you can see its tail a little bit more. So these are some other rays that we have here, and we had pups here as well. Now, think about this ray. Why might it have spots? So I didn't mention it before when we talked about some rays using a stinger for protection, some rays using camouflage to hide in the sand. But do you think this ray can hide in the sand? Do you think it can dig in and those blue spots will blend in? What do you think? They're going to blend in really well? Probably not. So why might this animal have bright blue spots? Why do animals have bright colors in the ocean? If you said it's for a warning, you're correct. So this animal is going to have these bright blue spots to help it warn other animals that maybe it doesn't want to interact with them. It may not be the friendliest, or that it could have a stinger. And these rays do have stingers. So blue spotted ribbon-tail rays are a stingray. And those spots just warn other animals not to come near. Now these are really cute animals. I think we might have another picture. We can see just how beautiful these ones are. And these are also, they're so cute. So this ray has more sort of rounded body. So not all rays have those big triangular fins like that cow-nosed ray or the bat ray. This ribbon-tail ray has more kind of rounded fins. And when they swim, they sort of move like a wave as they flap them up and down to help them move forward. And then right here you can see the spiracle on these rays. So just like those cow-nosed rays, they have that hole behind their eye to bring in water and pump it over their gills. Excellent. Now I want to go back to that cow-nosed ray for a moment because I believe we have a really cool video that shows us feeding these rays. And I couldn't forget that because it's a really neat thing to see how we feed some of our animals here. So I'm going to here we go. So we're going to take a look at this video. Now we were watching this video yesterday in preparation, and one of our other coworkers, we were joking about what it would sound like if we could hear these animals. I'm going to give you my best ray feeding impression. Basically is a slurping noise. So you would just hear because their mouth is on the bottom. Now I showed you their jaw, but their mouth is on the bottom, and they basically slurp or suction in their food. They sort of take a big gulp of water and suck that food into their mouth. So what our aquarists are doing here is we have this platform above one of our exhibits that has the cow-nosed rays, and they are putting shrimp or clam with those red tongs right into the mouth of these animals, and they come up onto this platform. So these rays, they are trained to know where to feed. So they know that this platform goes in the water when it's their feeding time. If they come right up to this platform, they're going to get their food. They're pretty cute and always very hungry. Excellent. Now we feed our bat rays the same way in their exhibit with tongs, and we feed them their food, and they get super excited. Sometimes we call it a splash zone. So in a lot of past summers, we have ray feedings where guests can come and feed our rays, and the rays get so excited they flap those fins and they send walls of water over the side of their exhibit and get people wet. I was feeding rays once, and I made the mistake of turning my back to the ray while I was talking to some guests, and I got the whole backside of my body wet because that ray was so excited for its food, it just pushed all that water and splashed over the side. And that's these bat rays that get really excited, and we call it there's a splash zone when we're feeding them. All right, before we move on to another ray we have here, we have a couple more questions that came in. So Brandon wants to know how we tell if rays are boys or girls. Now that's a good question. So we can actually say on this picture right here. So for rays and sharks, we look for an extra set of fins. They're called claspers, and they're located right down here. So this ray is a female because it doesn't have that extra set of fins. So that the only way to tell is we have to turn that animal over to see on the underside to see if they have the extra set of fins called claspers. So that's how we can tell male from female. Because from the other side, looking at the top of these animals, they pretty much look the same between the two genders. All right, Max wants to know, how big can eagle rays be? I'm so glad, Max, that you mentioned eagle rays, because that's the next ray I was going to talk about, because we have two eagle rays here. Here's a great picture of an eagle ray, one of our eagle rays here. So eagle rays can be about 11 feet, and that is their wingspan. So if we were to spread out their wings, the biggest they can grow is about 11 feet from one fin, from this fin to the other fin, 11 feet. But from the tip of their nose, and you can tell they have sort of this pointy nose, to the end of their tail can be about 16 feet. And our eagle rays are known for having a really long, skinny tail. We talked about their tail before. So they are a stingray. They do have a stinger. And they have a very, very long tail. Now, we have two of these eagle rays here, and they're some of our newer members. We've had them for about a year, and we've got to watch them grow, because when we first got these animals, they weren't very big. So we've got to watch them continue to grow. Now, they are not quite yet at that 11-foot range, but these animals are pretty big. And maybe we can take a look at our tropical exhibit and see if we can spot these rays. So in our tropical exhibit, our largest exhibit here at the aquarium, we have a camera inside that exhibit, and you can watch that anytime. You can go to our website and search our tropical reef camera, and our eagle rays live in this exhibit. So let's see if we can spot these spotted eagle rays while I take a look at some of these questions we have. So Lizzie wants to know, how many ray species are there? Great question. There are about 630 species of rays. So if we combine that, do we have our eagle ray? Ah, I see it. Over here. Took me a minute. This right here is our eagle ray. We'll see if it gets any closer. But you can see it's a lot bigger than some of the other rays you might see in here. And it's got those really beautiful wings. They're really majestic animals. All right, Olivia wants to know, what animals eat rays and how do they not get stung? Ooh, that's a good question. So there's a couple different animals who might eat rays. Some sharks might feed on rays. Orcas are also known to feed on rays. And I believe they just would avoid that stinger. So they're going to eat the meaty part of that animal, avoiding the stinger on the stingray. And, Giove wants to know, how fast can rays swim? So it depends on the species. Manta rays can swim up to 9 miles an hour. So it really depends. And they also can have bursts of speed. So a lot of rays, if you see them swimming around in here, they're just kind of flapping their fins, taking their time. Here's a cow nose ray cruising by. But if they get spooked, or if they're maybe chasing food, they might take off and have bursts of speed a little bit faster than their normal speed. It's great questions, everyone. Keep those questions coming. Now, eagle rays, maybe we'll take a look at some pictures of our eagle ray as they're here's a great picture because you can kind of see inside their mouth. So these eagle rays, they have a similar mouth to that bat ray jaw that we looked at before, and they're going to be feeding on things like clams and mussels as well. Now, what was really interesting is we trained these rays when we first got them, and we got to watch their training, that process. So we do train our rays and sharks to be fed from certain areas. Oh, here's that text line again. If you have any questions or observations or thoughts you want to send us, go ahead and text us. So these eagle rays, the way we train them is we had one of our divers go into our exhibit, and they were holding a purple cone. And in that cone were clams, which was the food that we were feeding these rays. And what the rays would do, they could smell the clam, they would come up, they would touch their nose, that pointy part of their nose, to that cone. And then when they touched their nose to the cone, they would be given their food. And our divers did this for a couple weeks. They kept feeding them whenever they touched their nose. Now, if the ray came up and waited, or if they touched the diver, they didn't get their food unless they touched the cone. And once they got used to that, our divers were able then to be out of the water, up from that same feeding platform we saw with the cow nose rays, and on that platform was a purple triangle, just like that cone they were holding. And our rays knew that that is where they would get fed, and so they would come up to that platform and get their food there. Now, maybe we can see a picture where we can see the back of the rays, because they have a really cool pattern. So it depends on the ray, but they have these white spots. Sometimes they're circles, sometimes they're dashes or dots, but it's unique to every individual. So every individual eagle ray has a different spot pattern. Kind of like our fingerprints are unique to each individual, they have individual patterns on their body. And that actually helps us tell we have a male and a female. And it helps us tell them apart because our female has full spots all over its body, whereas the male has sort of, I like to call it an ombre, where the spots kind of fade a little bit, but they look really different, and we're able to tell the two apart. Now, another way we can tell them apart is you see their really long tail, and one of our eagle rays has a little kink in their tail. And that's fairly common for animals with these super long tails. It's really straight and it has a little kink in it, and that's another way we can tell them apart. So that's another ray we have here. Now we have a couple minutes left, but what I want to talk about before we finish is not a ray we have here, but one of the reasons that we are so excited to talk about Shark and Ray Awareness Day is to spread awareness about a group of rays called Rhino Rays. Now Rhino Rays, we're going to bring up some pictures of them in just a second, but they are the most endangered group of marine fishes. Here's the bottom. You can see the mouth. They have really weird looking, interesting looking mouths on these animals. Do we have a picture of the body we can take a look at? So give us a moment. We're going to bring up a picture. But Rhino Rays, like I said, they are the most endangered group of marine fishes. Here we go. And they include things like wedgefish and the giant guitar fish. Now there are 16 species of Rhino Rays, and 15 of them are listed as critically endangered, which means that they are at risk for being extinct in the wild. And that is not great because these animals are so important for us to have in our oceans. Now, one of the reasons that these animals are facing such a tough time, they're not specifically being hunted. So no one is specifically hunting these outright, but they get caught for bycatch a lot of the time. And what that means is fishermen are looking for other things, and in their nets, they get caught, these Rhino Rays. And so what we're doing today is we're talking about these animals because we want to spread more awareness about animals like our Rhino Rays so that we can learn about them and we can also protect them. Now, I mentioned that these animals are really important to have in our oceans. So sharks and rays are super important to have in our oceans for a number of reasons. They provide a lot of service in our ocean in helping regulate populations in our ocean, and they are also what we call an indicator species. So a lot of these animals, they are the top of the food chain. They're the apex predator. And what that means is that they are at the very top. And if there's enough food to support that animal at the very top, then everything below it is healthy because there's enough food to support every level of that food chain all the way up to the top. And so it's really important to have animals like our Rhino Rays, which are also just beautiful animals, super unique to see. And they can get really big. This animal can get 6, 7, even more, or even longer than that, 6, 7 feet long. And they have this really beautiful pattern on their body. So it's really important to have these animals here in our oceans. Now we're going to put up that website once again as we're nearing the end. So if you want to learn more about Rhino Rays or other shark species, we have a lot of resources on our website, and you can visit this website right here, pacific.to/shark-and-ray-day, and you can learn more about these species, about why they are important for us to protect, and you can also donate if you feel like you would like to. Now, we're going to take one more look at our trap reef. We're going to give Cynthia a moment to pull up that trap reef and take one last observation of some of the rays that we have here at the aquarium. This exhibit is, like I said, it's our largest exhibit. It has about 1,000 animals in it, and it covers about 100 species, and a couple of those species are our rays, and there's also some shark species in here as well. So let's take one last look at these animals. So, here is our perfect timing. Out here in the back is our eagle ray. This is one of our eagle rays. And you can see they're just kind of floating by. So these animals, they call this coral reef their home. We also have some shark species in here. And we have the cow-nose rays in there. And we also have some other larger stingrays in here as well. So if you want to just watch these animals, kind of make some more observations, you can always visit our website and look for our webcams to watch this exhibit. And we have some rays in our shark lagoon as well. That's another place to look to learn about sharks and rays. Now, we are about out of time, but if you've enjoyed learning about rays today and you want to learn more about sharks, we have 2 more classes today. At 1 o'clock, we are going to be teaching about sharks and their teeth. And then at 2 o'clock, we're going to talk more about conservation for sharks and ray species. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.